Why do you keep being attracted to the wrong women? Women who never want you, women who are emotionally unavailable. You're attracted to women who they have no interest in you. You ignore things like values and you find yourself falling head over heels. Why? Because that's what we experienced when we were young. We grew up in households where no love was given to us. We find people more attractive if they recreate the emotional conditions for us from our childhood. Even when those conditions are painful, neglectful, or hurtful, or your nervous system treats this volatility, this unsureness, as like aliveness. The real problem lies with some responsibility you have. Because if we don't shift our attachment patterns, we will keep recreating the same relation we had before. When a man takes responsibility in his dating life, things start to change. So there are things you can do to start to change who you're attracted to. I will show you how to apply the knowledge. So, why do you keep being attracted to the wrong women? This is something many a man has asked themselves, right? Because ultimately what you're experiencing is maybe you're attracted to women who never want you. You're attracted to women who are emotionally unavailable. You're attracted to women who they have had no interest in you, right? Or you might find this part where you're attracted to certain women and those women never attracted to you, and the women who are you're not interested in, are interested in you, right? And one of the things about attraction is we think a lot of it is about thinking, we're choosing things. And you're going to realize in this podcast episode is that you're not really choosing attraction at all. Not in the cognitive way you think you are. You're doing it retrospectively. You meet someone and you're like, I'm attracted to them because of X, Y, and Z, when really just rationalizing was actually going inside you completely unconsciously, right? So I'm going to get into details about that. And then I'm going to talk about what you can do about it, because there are things you can do to start to change who you're attracted to. This is a conversation people don't really like to talk about, because it means they have to do work and they can't just complain about dating. They can't just complain about the women they meet. They can't complain about their ex-partners, because actually the responsibility comes back to you. And this is how I work with people. This is how I make the changes. You know, it's why my clients are getting married, they're getting engaged, they're moving in with their partners, they're meeting new women, because they take responsibility. When a man takes responsibility in his dating life, things start to change. When he blames women and blames the weather or blames immigrants or whoever wants to blame, right? Nothing changes, because that's not the real problem. The real problem lies with some responsibility you have. So where I'm going to start with the unconscious drivers of attraction, right? Got loads of notes here because there's some sciencey stuff here. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about the science because it's not really necessary for you. If you want that, go find a neuroscientist who will talk you through attraction. But you don't need that. That's just another form of procrastination a lot of the time. So attraction is largely about our limbic system, not our conscious thought, right? And our conscious choice. We think it's our conscious thought and choice because that makes us feel like we're in control, but you're not, right? It's ultimately, primarily, is driven by our limbic system, right? Not the neocortex, which is our thinking part of the brain, the front part. Because really it comes down to is attraction is driven by emotional and psychological pattern recognition. Human beings, right? Our minds, our brains are just really big pattern matchers. Right? A lot of what we do is just match patterns constantly. It's why large language models can feel really human, right? Because at basic level, they do a lot of what we do. And when I say large language models, I mean things like ChatGPT, Claude, or the AI that we talk with is not really AI. It's just large language models. There's also pattern matching. You said some words, it checks its patterns and it matches those words to what it says and gives you some phrases and so forth. That's my past experience of my degree in computer science. So I know a little bit about the background of this, right? So back to this. Our brains do a lot of attraction. It's about this kind of pattern matching. Yeah. Emotional and psychological. So what it does, it goes, oh, this person in front of me, right? Or this person I've started to talk to on the dating app, text message, whatever, on the unconscious level, stuff you are not aware of. You are picking up on signals and cues from this woman, right? The way she looks up and down, parts of her physical body, like all this emotional stuff. Because remember, our hearts send out an emotional little radar, electromagnetic pulse, a field that's about 3 feet in front of us. So we're picking up information from people constantly that is below the conscious level, right? We're picking up information from people below the conscious level in terms of the words they use, how they use words, the things we see in their pictures, the words they use in their profiles. We're picking up all this unconsciously. And our brains are matching that to our experience, right, of our past. I'm going to go into a bit more about this. We're just matching patterns from our past, which activate these patterns we see now in this woman, for instance. It just matches something our nervous system knows, is familiar with, not necessarily it likes, that it's familiar with, and it activates it, right? This is all happening automatically, below our awareness and very quickly, right? And this is why you ignore red flags. You ignore things like long-term compatibility. You ignore things like suitability. You ignore things like values, and you find yourself falling head over heels with a woman who is completely inappropriate for you or has no interest in you, right? Who, or you could argue, is completely out of your league, right? Not a term I use very often, but it's a term that men use very common. Out of your league. Isn't interested in you, is cold towards you, is hot and cold towards you, all these sorts of things. This is the reason why, right? And then the next point, I'm going to explain why that really happens for you, right? And then the second point about the unconscious drivers is around into attachment patterns. Now, this is really important because attachment is really the foundation of relating, right? And it's not just anxious, avoidant, that's all done. It goes deeper than that, because really our attachment is how the blueprint that we have inside our minds, right? Inside our nervous systems of how love should happen, whether how we should give love and how we should receive love. And what I have to say is, for most men, our attachment systems are broken, seriously broken, right? Because we grew up in households where no love was given to us, right? By our mothers or our fathers, or it was very conditional, right? Or it didn't feel safe to get love, right? There's just some examples to put out there. Or it was inconsistent, right? For instance, where maybe you could be loved 1 minute and then you could be beaten the next minute, right? You had this real seesaw. Or you didn't feel that it was safe for you to ask what you needed and get the love you wanted. And it doesn't necessarily mean you had an abusive household. It doesn't, because our little minds, our little brains like to focus on, put a lot of attention on what went wrong. So you can have a really good childhood for the most part, right? I've got a lot of men that come to work with me and they've had very good childhoods. Their parents are reasonably rich and wealthy. And, when I say reasonably, they're, middle class. They go to good universities and good colleges. They have another sibling or two. Their parents are together or divorced in a reasonably amicable way. And they are terrified of commitment. Right? Or they are the opposite and they are always trying to get into relationships too quickly. Or they're terrified of being too close to someone and not being accepted. Or they're afraid of not being good enough, right? But if you look at it on the surface, their lives have been pretty good, right? They've been fine. Their childhoods are fine. But the mind, the way the brain works, the way our nervous system works, it remembers the difficult moments and we create a story around it, right? That's not always the case of what it is. And this can impact our attachment. Like me, I often say is I felt my dad was very cold. I felt my mum was quite cold at times as well. And if you met my mum now, you wouldn't be like, well, what are you talking about, David? That's not how your mum is. But my little brain, my little nervous system remembers the times that the coldness was there and has latched on and created a story that was the whole thing. We very rarely remember the really wonderful and beautiful moments. They're like, we call the 10 out of 10 good. And we don't remember much of the kind of 7, 6, 5 kind of out of 10 good, but we remember the minus 10, right? The difficult times, the really painful times, the times that your parents neglected you, they forgot to pick you up from school, they made you feel like your emotions and feelings weren't welcome, they screamed at you for something small. You remember those, and those become the reality of your childhood for a lot of you, or at least the reality of your childhood of your nervous system. You might consciously remember it being all happy-go-lucky and rainbows, right? So the attachment starts to make a really big impact here, because it's what forms what we believe love should feel like, what relationships should feel like. So you've got the attachment that we experience with our mother and father. And then you have what you observe of their relationship, right? Like what their relationship is like. You get an idea of this is how mum is and how her dad is, blah, blah, blah. And then you have a bit of a judgment around that. Like, I don't want to be like my dad, or I don't want to be like my mum, or I don't want a relationship like them, right? This all kind of shapes into the attachment. And then the thinking we have about relationships. And these patterns, the attachment patterns, shape what feels chemically correct for us, chemically right for us, not consciously, right? Not cognitively, right? Chemically, subconsciously right to us. So the familiar patterns that our nervous system believes are how a relationship should feel. And I was digging into this before we jumped on. I did a little bit of research. And there's 3 statements here that I see a lot, and they kind of tally with what I've seen already. In that, what I see, avoidantly attached men disproportionately are attracted to emotionally unavailable or inconsistent partners. I see this a lot with avoidant men I work with. They're attracted to unavailable partners because they're just out of reach, and it's quite exciting, right? But usually one of their parents, father or mother, was emotionally unavailable, right? They couldn't quite connect. They didn't quite get the love and the care and the tenderness they desired. So that becomes a familiar pattern. That becomes the pattern that's installed in their nervous system of, this is what love is like. The other person is slightly unavailable. And this might sound strange to some of you, like, oh, but aren't avoidant people the ones who are unavailable? Now, it might seem like that, right? But like I said, I've worked with, hundreds now, probably, avoidant men in the last few years. And what always the same story they tell me is this: a lot of the women that they really like, me, I'll use myself as an example. A lot of the women that I really liked didn't like me back, right? This is a very common thing in dating because of just the general nature of 2 humans trying to align. But avoidant men's experience is often that they're quite attracted to the women who are emotionally unavailable. And part of that is because they mirror their own internal emotional unavailability, but also it mirrors what's familiar to them from their childhood relationships, right? And then when you get into this cycle, it's very easy for you to believe all women are emotionally unavailable, or all the women are attracted to emotionally unavailable, right? You hear people say that quite often, right? Secondly, and this is not about avoidant men, this is about anxiously attached men. The research also shows that anxiously attached men are poor towards partners who will trigger uncertainty for them and for them to need to pursue. Fascinating, isn't it? That we're attracted to the very thing that actually we don't like. Why? Because that's what we experienced when we were young. That's what our bodies, our muscle memory, our nervous system memory has. This is what love is like. Yeah, it's not this kind of conscious like, oh, I know what love is. Love is this, this, and this, and we chase that. And there's an element we can override it, right? But especially when we are just following what's attraction, right? Like, oh, I have to be with someone I'm attracted to. I hear this a lot from people. When we don't realize that much of our attraction is really fucking bullshit, right? Much of what our attraction is dysfunction, is recreating familiar patterns that we actually don't want or like. And then the third part of this attachment piece is that what often happens is that a secure person will feel very boring or flat to someone with an insecure attachment style and to their nervous system. So if you're anxiously attached or you're avoidantly attached, someone who is securely attached, good communication, good with boundaries, happy with distance, happy with closeness, isn't desperate for a relationship, isn't running away, that sort of thing. Someone who's securing themselves, securing relationships will feel boring to you. They'll feel boring because it's not triggering your attachment system. Your attachment system doesn't flare up. You don't have this chemistry and this excitement and this attraction. You just have this, like when they die in movies on what do they call that machine? I don't know. That machine that goes like this. I was watching Stranger Things recently. If any of you watching Stranger Things, give me a little shout in the comments. Where Max was almost dead, in the final season. Sorry if that's a spoiler for you. That little thing, the heart monitor thing, right? It feels flat and boring. When actually, what a lot of us are moving towards, right, is we want something that's doing this constantly, which is that, what's it called? When someone like their heart beatings is really fast, like, you're panting, you've just been running, your heart rate is really high. That is what attracts us because it feels exciting. It feels like, oh God, this is my person. I feel attracted to this person. When actually that might just be your childhood experience of love and what it felt like to be loved and not loved. Or you might want these people it's like this, dead, and so forth. And that's what love feels like to you. So you gravitate towards that. And there's another piece of thing here. This all comes from some research I looked up. Research consistently shows that people rate partners, you got to really listen to this, people rate partners more attractive when they recreate the emotional conditions from early attachment experiences. Right? When even when those conditions are painful, neglectful, or hurtful, we find people more attractive if they recreate the emotional conditions for us from our childhood. Isn't that fucked up? Because most people, like most of us, didn't necessarily have what we call happy childhoods. And what do I mean by that? We don't remember them being particularly happy, or our nervous system doesn't remember them being particularly happy, right? Not as like a general thing, but remember the unhappy parts. As I said, we remember the difficult parts because we're trying to shield ourselves away from those happening again. And then we also partly install those as how love should be. And my next point here is trauma bonding. I don't talk about this enough. I talk about this more in my one-to-one work because I see this a lot with people. And trauma bonding and intermittent reinforcement. So what's this? Intermittent reinforcement is like when you sometimes get what you want. It's like unpredictable affection, right? An unpredictable affection creates stronger bonding than consistent care for people with insecure attachment, right? It's the same mechanism as gambling. Yeah. It's the same reinforcement schedule in gambling addiction. Right? Where you say you do the one-arm bandit. For some reason, I was thinking of the one-arm bandit, right? If every 10 to 15 times you try it, you get a reward, that's where addiction happens. Because it's not predictable, right? And it's intermittent. So it feels exciting. So in relationship or in dating, that's like you are seeing someone over the course of 3 months. You're in a situationship, right? And sometimes you see them and it feels like this could really turn into something. And then after you see them, they don't reply to you for 3 weeks. And then they pop up. I'm like, hey, how are you doing? I've missed you. And you're like, oh my God, they missed me. Maybe they want something. And then you see each other, you have great sex, and then they disappear again. Intermittent reinforcement. The reinforcement that there's something could be here, but it's intermittent. There's moments of emptiness, right? And that's the person in the side of the situationship that I would call the kind of like the hoper. I like that phrase. There's like the hoper in the situationship, right? Because on the other side of the situationship, often, not always, this is my, often in my situationships, where there's a like, I won't call them the controller. I'm kind of putting these words for the first time here. There's a person who's hoping for more, right? That desires more. And on the other side, you've got the person who's kind of like the person that's happy. They're okay with how it is. Yeah. They're the okayer. So the person who's okay, they're fine with the situation. And in many ways, that's why I call them a controller first, because they're happy with the way things are. They're in control of their emotions generally, and they're in control of the situation. They're the person that's doing what we call kind of breadcrumbing maybe, right? They're the person who will dictate how often you see each other and how often you don't see each other. And they're the one that will disappear. I've been that person many, many times in my life. I'll be really honest with you. So the controller and the hoper. And when you're the hoper, you're in this like addiction cycle because you're like hoping it's going to be more, hoping they're going to contact you, right? And I see a lot of guys get into this as well, right? Men that I've worked with a lot, especially anxious men, I find get into this situation. Sometimes, what's it called? Fearful avoidant men as well, right? And it's not, and also I've been in a situation as an avoidant man, right? Where the woman I'm dating is more avoidant than me. That's happened to me numerous times. I've often been very attracted to those women. It's like an addiction. Yeah. Because you have an obsession. They can often feel like an increased sexual charge. Like your decision-making and choices start to degrade. Like you start seeing them when you shouldn't see them. You cancel plans when you shouldn't cancel plans. And you feel this really strong attachment to the person who's unavailable, right? And this is why emotionally unavailable partners can feel so intoxicating, right? And why people who are consistent, let me give an example of the consistency. Someone who always texts you back within a day feels boring, doesn't it, for you? They text you back within a day, like it's the same sort of cadence. It can feel dull and boring for us, because there's a consistency. They don't. If they sometimes reply straight away and sometimes they reply a week later, there's this whole unknown. There's an excitement because you don't know what's going to happen. It's not predictable. It's unpredictable, right? And it can feel more intoxicating to our system. Maybe not consciously, you're not saying this to yourself, right? But your nervous system loves it. Yeah. Your nervous system treats this volatility, this unsureness, as like aliveness. Oh, I'm alive. This feels so, I shouldn't like this, but I do like this. Those sorts of things come out of people's mouths, right? Another unconscious mechanism that occurs in attraction is called like this is projection. That's what I call it, projection. I know that Jung calls it this kind of missing self. And it's attraction through projection of the beautiful traits that we wish we had, or we do actually have that we don't see, onto another person. So maybe I am an avoidant man. Why don't you flip it up a bit? Let's say I'm an anxious guy. I'm an anxiously attached man who is a bit low on self-esteem and confidence, and I don't express myself that well. And I wish I was a bit more risk-taking. I meet a woman who is very confident, very alive, doing the things I wished I'd do. Yeah, very expressive. Maybe she's very confident. Maybe she's quite dominant, right? And become really attracted to that person, right? This is the projection. It's the projection of the traits that you wish you had onto this woman, and then you become attracted to that person through those traits. Sometimes the person doesn't even really have those traits in the abundance that you think they do, right? Then this can happen later down the line when you start to get to know them. You realize like, oh, wow, they're not actually that risk. They're not really down for risks, and they're not really that confident. Oh my God, I just projected it all onto them. I fell for them. I fell in love with them. And now I've got to know them. They don't have those traits. And now I'm not interested, which is fascinating, right? Because then we learn that our projection is what we fell in love with and not the person in front of us. Message. For those people who have seen Don't Be a Menace While Drinking Juice in the Hood. Classic movie. If you haven't seen it, go Google it. Go check it out on YouTube. We fall in love with the projection. We're not actually attracted to the person. We're attracted to who we think they are, or who we've projected them to be. Again, the thinking isn't necessarily conscious. We have not consciously chosen to project onto them. It's an unconscious mechanism that's happening. So there's a lot of unconscious stuff, right? Unconscious stuff, so much unconscious stuff. So when you start to bring this into account, you start to realize that you think you're attracted to people based on this and that and that and this. And there's 80% of what you think is happening isn't happening. As it Jung that said, and I butcher this quote because I think he didn't say it in this exact way, it's like until you make the unconscious conscious, you'll just think it's fate. So many people think love is fate. Some people, relationships are fate, that dating is fate. I either like them or not. There's either chemistry or not. There's either a spark or not. Bollocks. That's what I say. When you become skilled, as I definitely did in my single years, become skilled in creating the spark. You know how to do it. Well, I knew how to do it. I knew what it took to create spark. You need some mystery. You need a bit of anxiety. You need to be able to be playful and fun. You need to be confident and so forth. That generally creates a spark, right? In the women that I met. And there's a lot of nuance to that. I could literally do a whole podcast series on that, creating the spark piece. But I don't talk about that very deliberately because I think it's unethical. You can become quite unethical with creating the spark. So I don't talk about the deep parts of that. You don't need to know. So another point goes away is why we overlook available partners who would be ready to love us and care for us and be with us, and we have happy relationships with. There's a cognitive dissonance that happens. Sorry, cognitive distortion here, right? We remember who we wanted, right? Who rejected us, and who triggered this feeling of longing. If I said to you, okay, tell me about 4 women that you really wanted in your past, right? I could list them off. There was Barbara. There was Malu. Sophie. God, that was a long time ago. Sophie. Yeah. I could reel them off to you, like I really longed for, right? And if I asked you to say who's rejected you, Barbara rejected me eventually. It's a long time for me, because I've been in a relationship for like 6 years now. But I can think of definitely a few people who I went on dates with and thought, oh, this is going to be amazing. There was this ginger girl that I met at this event once as well that sticks in my mind. That's probably the one of the ones that's not too long ago. There was someone else I met at this, something called Sex Club, like a bunch of times. You can remember them, right? And I have to go back 6 years. You probably have to go back a few weeks, months even, right? And who triggered longing? God, most of those people, that's the third one. Who triggered longing? We remember that stuff. But you know who we forget? We forget who wanted us that we weren't interested in. We forget that. And some of you might go, oh, there's been no women that, have ever been interested in me. That's how deeply you've forgotten. Right? You might not have been attracted to them. It doesn't matter. I didn't talk about whether you're attracted or not. Who wanted you? Right? It might have been the woman who was in the coffee shop that was smiling at you excessively. Or you might not even be trained to notice when women are attracted to you. And that's one of the problems you have, right? One of the other things we forget is who makes us feel safe. Yeah. I can think of, going back to the times I traveled, there was one woman I dated for when I was traveling, and she made me feel super safe. I remember her actually, right? we dated for a little while. But we forget those sorts of people, right? And we forget the people who don't activate that kind of feeling of anxiety and pursuit. That feeling of like, oh my God, am I going to get them? We forget those people because they don't do that to us. They don't do I'm doing this thing with the heart monitor going up and down. I forget that I'm on video and audio. They don't do that to us. Yeah. So it's just this kind of selection bias where we selectively remember some information that fits the narrative that we have, like, oh my God, I always attract women who are unavailable. Well, that's the narrative you have. So you're in this selection bias, this confirmation bias, where you only remember the data set or the information that confirms the opinion and thoughts that you already have. We do this so much in society, this kind of confirmation bias and selection bias, like we do it in dating so much. I speak to so many clients and we go through this, like, oh, look, I just made this assumption about them. And then all I saw was that through their behavior. We're doing this to ourselves, right? And then that gets us to this belief, this erroneous belief that a lot of men and women have. There are no good women out there, or there are no good men out there, right? But really, it's just a byproduct of our mental bullshit, our attachment, right? Or the kind of unexamined attachment filter. That's all it is. So now you're thinking, David, you've explained this to me and I feel stupid and I feel like there's nothing I'll ever be able to do about it. Well, luckily there is plenty you can do about it, right? And all the stuff I'm going to talk about actually here is stuff that I'm going to be really diving deeper into inside my program Relate, which is going to be starting in March. The details are below. You can go down and you can add yourself to the waitlist below in the description or the, show notes, depending if you're on audio or on video, you can go and do that, right? And because this is the work that I do with men, we have to start to shift our attachment patterns, right? Because if we don't shift our attachment patterns, we will keep recreating the same relationship we had before. Right? This is the fundamental work when it comes to dating and relationships, when you're in a relationship as well, to start to create a different experience of relationship, because your attachment stays online. Even when you get in a relationship, it doesn't suddenly change. It stays online. I can tell you this as someone who's been in a relationship for 6 years. You still have to work on this, right? So how do we change the patterns? The first thing to know is that cognitive insight alone won't change anything. Just knowing, right? Knowing that you're attracted to unavailable partners doesn't change anything. Telling yourself, stop being attracted to unavailable partners doesn't change anything. Even to some degree, and I see this for people where they take dating advice of like, if a person does A, B, C, and D, that means they're unavailable. And then they apply that to their dating lives. They go, okay, so if I meet this woman on date 1, 2, or 3, and she does these things, that means she's unavailable. I should stop dating her. It doesn't stop you from being attracted. You've noticed this. Yeah? It doesn't change. Because the change is deeper than just like doing something different. Doing is just like this surface level piece in this. The deeper piece, which is number 2, which is shifting the nervous system, right? Shifting the nervous system. Not the nervous system is connected to the brain and all down the spine, all throughout the body. it's shifting how the responses and reactions, right, to people and to what our attraction means over time. Not something you do in a week, not something you do in a month. It's something you do over 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. And you might hear that and go, oh, that sounds like a really long time, David. I don't have that time. Well, yes, you do. You know, you do have that time. Trust me, it's worth it. I'd be out here on the road. No, I would, if I hadn't been, I'd just be going through the same motions I had been before, being in like relationships I don't enjoy, like being with partners who are good, but not quite good enough, being frustrated, like, you know, being single and going through loads of women and having lots of meaningless sex. That's what I would be doing. But I'm not. I'm in a wonderful relationship, and Bjorn is 18 months old now, and he's fun and he smiles and he's happy, but he doesn't sleep very well, which is very painful at the moment. But that's a different thing. That's a different podcast episode, isn't it? So this number 2 is about nervous system regulation, right? You have to start shifting how your nervous system responds, and also how you notice when you're attracted to someone, right? You have to start to become intimately aware of like, oh, look, I'm attracted to someone. What does this feel like inside of me? Yeah, introspective awareness, nervous system regulation, somatic practices, right? What does this mean about this person? If I'm attracted to them, what does this mean is going on for them? How are they actually acting? If I put attraction to one side, who are they being? What am I seeing? Am I feeling safe and calm and relaxed? Or am I feeling this heightened excitement of anxiety and even stress? And that's why we have to get into the body. We have to notice what we're feeling, because, you know, we don't really know. We just think, oh, I'm attracted to them. There's chemistry. There's a spark. And we've given these abstract words when we don't know the actual kind of under the hood of what that means for us. For some people, the spark, attraction, chemistry is actually a massive amount of anxiety, unsureness, stress, worry, fear. When actually what we're looking for when we meet someone is some level of calm. Like, yeah, there's excitement, right? But you actually want to feel like, I can be with this person. Like, there's enough predictability, because we need mystery and predictability. You know, there needs to be a level of those two things. But most of the time we get this very wrong, right? We go for too much unpredictability and not enough stability, because we find stability boring. Then we start to like repair our attachment system by learning about attachment, by also noticing when we are attached to somebody, what we start thinking and feeling, how we start reacting to small things that happen, the stories that we create, you know, how we are interacting with women. Like, oh, I meet a woman I'm attracted to, and I suddenly go into fear of rejection. You're like, oh, that's interesting. I'm telling myself the story of rejection, and I'm taking that from the past and I'm placing it in this moment with this woman when it's not here, right? And for some people, what needs to happen is they need to slow down, you know, the dating process. For some people, they need to do the opposite. They need to actually speed it up, because their habit is making things so slow that things never get anywhere. And then for some men, the practice is actually increasing your ability, your kind of capacity for intimacy, not just sex, intimacy and closeness. Because what happens for a lot of men is we have closeness to a woman and we start to panic, we start to worry, we start to project into the future negativity, and we try to reject and run away, right? Or we start getting close to someone and we want to get even closer to them, and we try to fast track the relationship into being something, right, deeper and faster. And then we overload the other person. So there's finding where we're at. That's why a lot of relationship and dating advice doesn't work for people, because you've got to know where you're at to start with, you know, to then apply it to depending on your situation. That's the nervous system part. And part 3, which is actually reframing attraction, not as truth, because that's what we take it as, like, oh, I'm attracted to them or I'm not attracted to. There's spark or there's not spark. There's chemistry and not chemistry. It's a truth, we take it like it's like, oh, that's true. And if that's not true, then we leave. You need to see it as a signal, right? Of one of many signals, right? You start to learn that maybe chemistry, spark, attraction is the sign of a familiar pain and plan and path falling, right? You might see it as this activation of old defense mechanisms that actually stop you from being in healthy love. It might be showing you a sign that you're about to self-abandon yourself, right? You start to fall into people pleasing, for example, right? You just start to see what's happening. Or it might be that you start to see like low chemistry as like feeling this could be safe. You know, this could be loving. This could be a place where I can be myself, right? And you start to reframe this in your mind and then start to observe other things that you wouldn't have noticed when you were in these states before. Because in the past, you might feel, oh, low chemistry means, this is boring. This is never going to go anywhere. I'm never going to be sexually attracted to this person, blah, blah, blah. So you start to learn there's something else. There's something different. There's things that you're not seeing because we put on the goggles of this is boring. This is going to be unattractive. And then we blank out anything that's contrary to that. All right. So you have to start to do, there's some mental work in there, but there's also a lot of kind of somatic and emotional work to start to shift how we respond to things, how we react to things emotionally, and observing those emotions, not just being in the emotions, but observing them. Like, oh, I'm having this feeling about this thing. Oh, that's interesting, because that's actually not quite what's occurring. What else is occurring, right? With overall discernment and intelligence, which I think we lack often as men, because we haven't been taught this emotional work. We haven't been taught to be emotionally connected to ourselves. Right? We've been taught to actually distance ourselves from emotion and just be productive and just take action and just do and just suppress. But actually that is what gets in the way of our ability to create healthy relationships, right? To attune to the women, to even attune to our own emotions and feelings and know what's going on for us, right? So that we can actually respond to those feelings and emotions, right? In a way that's in alignment with who we are and who we want to be. Instead of what often happens with men is we feel stuff internally, like rejection. A fear of rejection is a good one. I feel fear of rejection. All right, I'm not doing anything. I'm not taking any action. A fear of failure. Okay, I'm not doing anything. I'm going to just procrastinate on this and do nothing and tell myself that there's no good women. When actually your fear of rejection or your fear of failure is like, oh, this actually means something to me, what I'm about to do. And this is an old story that's actually trying to keep me stuck. I'm going to do something different. You see that? There's like being in the emotion and being completely consumed by it. And there's having the intelligence to notice the emotion, be separate from it, the kind of meditative way of observing and then taking the action that's in alignment with who you want to be. That's the work I do with men all the time. Right? Because if you don't do this work, you will just continually blame women because you're like, I'm afraid of rejection. And sometimes this is all subconscious stuff. I'm afraid of rejection. Well, I don't acknowledge that I'm afraid of rejection. So I'm going to blame women for not being compatible, or for women not making enough effort in dating, or for all the women not being the right sort of women, or it just not being safe to approach women because I might get arrested and put in jail. Yeah, it's easier to think that than acknowledge that you feel afraid and then secondary, do something about that fear of rejection. And that's why I think a lot of men are stuck in this day and age. They're terrified of women. They don't know how to emotionally connect with them, so they become bitter and frustrated. And I see this, man. Men come to me sometimes and they're like, I don't meet women. They reject me all the time. And then we get to it and we see some very obvious things that they're doing. They don't see them until we have a conversation about them. Then they see some very obvious things. They're like, oh my God, I'm doing those things, those 4 things, or these 5 things, or these 2 things. And this is actually what turns women off me or pushes them away or means I never actually do anything, right? It's all about learning what's going on underneath, but actually it's not just learning it because you can learn it and still stay in it. It's actually having the capacity and the skill to learn it and see it happening and choose something different. And then having the skill set, emotional expression, playfulness, leadership, fun, confidence to lead yourself to something different. And this is exactly what we're going to be doing inside of Relate. Relate's going to be a program for men who are single and in relationship. It's about learning the skills to really relate deeply. This is like the culmination of 10 years of self-development work that I've taken on, that I've done, that's helped me create the relationship I have. That's helped me shift and change my clients' lives, or them change their lives. I don't really do the work. They do the work. Now, this is why my clients are getting married, why they're moving in with their partners, why they're meeting new partners, why they're breaking up with partners that don't serve them, right? Why they're having better sex than they've ever had before. Sometimes I get to meet my clients' girlfriends' wives, and sometimes they tell me how much the work that they've done with me made a difference in their relationship. So this could be you. So the program's going to start in March. Like I said, there's a waitlist below. add yourself to a wait list, and then you're going to get an email about it. I send you an email telling you some details about it, then inviting you to join at some point. There's no heavy thing. There's no like big sales. I'm going to send you an email. We can have a chat. But you've listened to this and you're thinking, okay, I want something different. Because I always say to people, if you don't change anything in a year, what's going to happen? Or 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and you're going to be lonely, you're going to be sad, you'll be bitter, you'll be frustrated. So you can do something about it now, or you can just not do anything. And a lot of you are just not doing anything. Or just you're sitting listening to more and more YouTube videos and more podcasts and thinking that that's going to change it. But the actual problem is what you don't have is accountability and taking action in your life to really change things. You know everything, but you don't know how to apply it. And that's where Relate comes in. I will show you how to apply the knowledge, because that's what I've had to do myself and with my clients. Perfect. So if you're interested in Relate, down below in the notes, show notes, descriptions, whatever it's called there. If you have any questions about what I've said today, you know, if you are wondering about Stranger Things, you can get back to me on that as well. Feel free to drop anything you like in there. I do always check the comments and get back to them. All right. Ciao, ciao.